The sharp crack of my laptop slamming against the wall echoed through the living room, shards of plastic and metal scattering across the hardwood floor. My pulse spiked, but I refused to shrink beneath my father's furious glare. "Maya, you ungrateful child," he bellowed, his accent thick with rage. "Do you have any idea how long we've planned this? The Sharmas are one of the most respected families in our community." On the cream leather sofa, my mother dabbed at her eyes with the edge of her silk sari, her distress more about appearances than my feelings. "What will people say?" she murmured, her voice trembling. "The invitations have already been sent." I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to meet their stares head-on. My name is Maya Patel, and at 24, I was about to lose everything because I refused to marry a man I had met twice. Both times, he spoke more about his Tesla and Silicon Valley connections than about anything that actually mattered. "I don't care about the Sharmas or their money," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I won't marry Arun. I don't love him, and I never will." My father spat out the word like it was venom. "Love is a fantasy from your American movies. Marriage is about family, duty, tradition. We came to this country with nothing, worked our fingers to the bone to give you everything, and this is how you repay us?" I glanced at the broken laptop, a sick ache settling in my stomach. Hours of code, a year's worth of work, my startup, the AI algorithm I'd been building in secret, the dream I hadn't dared share with them. My parents had paid for my Stanford education expecting a stable career and an obedient daughter. Instead, I had been creating something that could revolutionize personal finance. "I'm building something," I said at last, "a company. My algorithm could help millions of people manage their money better. I don't need Arun's connections, I can make it on my own." My father laughed, a cold, dismissive sound that sent ice through my veins. "A company? You think you can succeed in the tech world without our support, without the doors this marriage would open?" "Yes," I said simply, "I do." My mother rose, her face suddenly impassive. "Maya, enough. You will marry Arun next month as planned. End of discussion." A slow, measured breath filled my lungs as I spoke the words I knew would change everything. "No, Ma, I won't." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My father's face darkened from red to purple, while my mother's manicured fingers trembled at her throat. "Then you are no longer our daughter." His voice was calm now, chillingly final. "Pack your things and leave. Don't expect a single rupee from us. Let's see how far you get without our money." My mother didn't speak, she simply turned her back, whether in grief or anger, I couldn't tell. Numb, I walked to my room, dragging a suitcase from the closet. Clothes, documents, my backup hard drive. I packed quickly, hands shaking as I changed my bank password. My father would cut me off, of that I was certain, but I had savings, enough to survive for a while. As I descended the curved staircase of the mansion I'd called home all my life, memories flooded my mind, learning to ride a bike in the driveway, doing homework at the kitchen island, celebrating Diwali with laughter and sweets. Now, those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. At the door, my father stood with his arm around my sobbing mother. "If you leave now," he said, "don't come back unless you're ready to apologize and accept this marriage." I hesitated, looking at them one last time. "I love you both," I said softly, "but I won't sacrifice my dreams for your traditions." The door slammed shut behind me, sealing my fate. I loaded my suitcase into my old Honda Civic, the car my father had scoffed at when I refused the BMW he'd offered, and drove into an uncertain future. That night, I crashed on my best friend Sarah's couch, staring at the ceiling as reality set in. She sat beside me until 3 a.m., letting me cry, rage, and finally, plan. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, squeezing my hand. "But Maya, how are you going to build your company without your parents' connections?" I wiped my eyes and pulled out my phone, opening the latest prototype of my algorithm. "I'll find investors who believe in the technology, not my last name. The algorithm works, I know it does." The following weeks blurred into a cycle of apartment hunting, freelance coding gigs, and endless investor pitches. I moved into a tiny studio in a rundown part of San Francisco, took a part-time job to keep the lights on, and spent every waking moment refining my product. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives and family friends, all urging me to reconsider before it was too late. I blocked them, one by one. Then the rejection emails started pouring in. Too risky. Not enough traction. Come back when you have more experience. Each one felt like a door slamming in my face, but I refused to stop knocking. 3 months after leaving home, my savings dwindling to almost nothing, I received an email that changed everything. A partner at a prominent VC firm had heard about my algorithm through one of my Stanford professors. They wanted to meet. 4 days, I meticulously prepared my pitch, knowing this could be my only chance. The morning of the meeting, I slipped into my most professional outfit, a simple black dress from a life I had left behind, and took a steadying breath. After my presentation, the lead partner leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Your technology is impressive," he said, "but what really interests us is your passion and resilience. We've heard your story, Miss Patel. Not many people would walk away from everything to pursue their dreams." My hands tightened in my lap. Sometimes you have to risk everything to build something meaningful. He smiled and slid a term sheet across the table. "We'd like to offer you $2 million in seed funding." Tears pricked my eyes as I took in the numbers, but I forced myself to stay composed. This wasn't just about proving my parents wrong anymore. This was about creating something that mattered, about showing other young women from backgrounds like mine that they could forge their own paths. That afternoon, I signed the papers, and FinWise Technologies was born. The next year was a whirlwind. I built a team, refined my algorithm, and grew our user base. Thousands of people were now using our technology to manage their finances. My parents' silence remained unbroken, but I heard whispers from relatives. Arun had married a doctor from a good family, and my mother had taken to telling people I was studying abroad. Their denial of my success hurt, but I funneled that pain into work. FinWise grew faster than I could have imagined. Our users doubled, then tripled. Major financial institutions reached out for partnerships. I spoke at conferences, landed features in tech magazines, and made the 30 under 30 lists. Then, 18 months after I walked out of my parents' house, I got a call that changed everything. It was from one of the largest fintech companies in the world. "Miss Patel," the CEO's voice was smooth, confident, "we've been watching FinWise's growth. We'd like to discuss an acquisition." I stared at the offer when it came through. $600 million. The number felt surreal. 2 years ago, I had been sleeping on a friend's couch. Now, "You've built something extraordinary," my lead investor said during negotiations. "Are you sure you want to sell?" I thought carefully. This acquisition would mean our technology could reach millions more people. My team would be secure, and they wanted me to stay on as head of innovation, with complete creative control. "Yes," I said, "it's the right move." The day the acquisition was announced, my phone exploded. TechCrunch, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal. Everyone wanted an interview. But the message that made my breath catch came from an unexpected sender, my cousin Priya. "Maya, have you seen the news? Your father collapsed when he saw the headlines. He's in the hospital." My heart clenched. Despite everything, the thought of him being ill sent a wave of emotion crashing through me. I called Priya immediately. "It's not serious," she assured me, "just stress and high blood pressure. But, Maya, maybe it's time. They've seen what you've built. They can't deny your success anymore." I sat in my office, watching the sun dip below the San Francisco skyline. Success had healed many wounds, but not all of them. "Send me the hospital details," I said. An hour later, I stood outside my father's private room at Stanford Medical Center, my pulse hammering. Through the window, I saw my mother sitting beside him, her face weary in a way I had never seen before. My father lay awake, staring at a muted news broadcast. Ironically, the screen displayed a segment about FinWise's acquisition. I knocked softly and stepped inside. The air in the room shifted as they turned to face me. "Maya," my mother whispered, her eyes filling with tears. My father's expression was unreadable. The last time I had seen him, he had been furious. Now, he just looked tired. "The doctors say it's nothing serious," I said, keeping my voice even, "but you should rest, Papa." His jaw tightened. "Why are you here?" "Because you're my father," I answered simply, "and because maybe it's time we stop pretending." My mother rose, wringing her hands. "Maya, we saw the news. Your company, it's quite an achievement." I almost laughed at the understatement. "It's more than that, Mom, it's everything. Even Papa taught me to be hardworking, determined, ambitious. I just applied those lessons differently than you expected. By throwing away our traditions? My father asked, but there was no anger this time, just something else, something closer to resignation. No, by choosing my own path, I said gently. The world is changing, Papa. Success doesn't have to follow the old rules anymore. He was silent for a long time, staring at the TV, where my face was still visible on the muted news broadcast. $600 million, he muttered at last, shaking his head. My daughter. Your daughter who you disowned, I reminded him, my voice softer now, who you said wasn't welcome unless she accepted an arranged marriage. My mother made a small, pained sound. We were wrong, Maya, we were so wrong. Yes, you were, I agreed, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because, despite everything, you're my parents, and if you're willing to accept me, really accept me, for who I am and the choices I make, then maybe we can start rebuilding. For the first time, my father met my gaze without anger, disappointment, or resistance, and in his eyes, I saw something new, respect. Not the respect that came from duty or tradition, but something real, something earned. He exhaled heavily. The boy you were supposed to marry, he said, his voice quieter now. Arun, his company just filed for bankruptcy. The Sharmas lost everything. I nodded, unsurprised. Life has a way of showing us what really matters, doesn't it? Slowly, he reached out his hand. After a brief hesitation, I took it. His palm was warm, familiar, stirring memories of childhood walks, of proud pats on the head for good grades. I am sorry, Beatty, he said softly, using the endearment I hadn't heard in years. Your mother and I, we were trapped in old ways of thinking. We couldn't see that the world had changed. My mother moved closer, her hand covering ours. Can you forgive us, Maya? Can we try to be a family again? Tears slipped down my cheeks. It won't be easy, I warned. Things can't go back to how they were. I make my own decisions now, about my life, my career, who I love. We know, my father said. To my surprise, there was no hesitation. You've proven you can make better decisions than we ever could for you. That night, for the first time in years, we truly talked. My parents listened as I explained the technology behind Finwise. My mother cried when I told her about those first months on my own, and my father's face darkened with shame. You were working on this even before he gestured vaguely, unable to finish the sentence. Kick me out? I filled in. He nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, I said, I tried to tell you that night, but you wouldn't listen. And now you're the CEO of your own division at one of the largest tech companies in the world, my mother said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. No, I corrected gently, now, I'm exactly who I was always meant to be. The money, the success, it's wonderful, but it's not what matters most. What matters is that I stayed true to myself. As I left the hospital that evening, my parents' numbers were back in my phone, and tentative plans for dinner were set for the following week. Success had given me more than financial freedom, it had given me the chance to rewrite the rules of my relationship with them. Over the next few months, we rebuilt what had been broken. There were still awkward moments, still remnants of their old expectations, but this time, I had the strength to address them directly. My mother still asked about marriage, but now, it was with curiosity rather than command. And my father, to everyone's surprise, became one of my biggest champions. At business dinners, he would proudly tell investors and relatives alike about his daughter, the tech entrepreneur. 1 year after the acquisition, I stood on stage at a major tech conference, delivering a keynote about innovation and tradition, about breaking barriers and building bridges. In the front row, my parents sat beaming, no longer ashamed of the path I had chosen, finally understanding that success didn't have to come in the form they had once envisioned. Sometimes, I told the audience, the hardest people to stand up to are the ones you love, but sometimes, standing up for yourself is the only way to help them grow, too. That evening, at a quiet family dinner, my father raised his glass. To my daughter, he said, his voice thick with emotion, who had the courage to show us a better way. My mother reached for my hand, squeezing it, and to new beginnings. I smiled, thinking of the long road that had brought us here, the broken laptop, the slammed door, the nights of doubt and fear. They had all led to this moment, not just to success, but to understanding, To growth. To a new kind of family, built on respect instead of obligation. To new beginnings, I echoed, raising my glass, and to having the courage to write your own story. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't the ones that make headlines. Sometimes, they are the quiet moments of reconciliation, of walls breaking, of love growing strong enough to bridge the gap between past and future. I had done more than build a company. I had built a bridge. And that, more than any acquisition or accolade, was worth everything I had risked to get here.